Evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Knife 911. Today we're going to be talking about the Ferrum Forge / Massdrop / Wee Knives Crux in S35VN I have here in front of me. So to get started, 911 on this guy is that it's one of the budget offerings coming from a collaboration between Massdrop, Ferrum Forge, and Wee Knives, the actual manufacturer. It's a 3.5 inch drop point blade with a fairly big finger choil. Right, it's got a fairly high saber grind and a little bit of a swedge on it going all the way down the blade. Stock is 125 thousandths or 1/8 of an inch. It weighs in around 4.5 ounces, so it's a bit hefty for a knife this size. But first impressions of this thing are really quite impressive. Its clean design and its simple elements, the finish of the solid titanium scales, this case is bronze. Its acid stone watch over previous bronze anodizing is just terrific. I haven't had many titanium scales, really at any price point, look really as good as these. And it's one of those things that I'm continually impressed with whenever I carry this knife. It's just the feeling of solidity, the bank vault-like lockup, and the general good design and use at work here is really a beautiful thing. You know, this is a satin finished blade, and it's a piece of S35VN, and that's, you know, okay for me. It's not terrific, but it's okay. It's certainly perfectly adequate and enough to go on with. But one of the things that I didn't really appreciate at first until I really started using this guy is just how good this pocket clip is. It's small, it's streamlined, it's out of the way. Yes, the knife sticks up a little bit out of your pocket, but it doesn't stick up much more than about that. So it's really tolerable, very easy to carry. I actually ordered one of the Pops custom clips, the Massdrop Extra, for one of these things where it's a deep carry clip, it loops up. And I put it on, and I just didn't like it as well as I liked the original clip. It's the only time I've ever actually retained the original clip when I had a replacement. And that really speaks to how good that clip is. Another thing which I noticed in going a little further into this intake here is the flipper tab on this guy. The flipper tab sticks out, you know, a good 1/4 of an inch or so. And it's jimped, and it's very slightly sharp on the sides. So when you're reaching into your pocket, this thing can kind of dig in a little bit, and it can brush up against objects in your pocket, which is not, you know, a terrible, terrible thing, but certainly if you carry other items in your pocket you don't want damaged, it's something to be aware of. One of the things that I really like about this knife is its action. It has, especially considering its price, it just has a terrific action. It's this nice, firm, crisp detent. Right, good feedback on the lockup, and it locks up relatively early, and that's a steel lock bar to insert on there. So this knife is just confidence inspiring really at every turn, and there's no reason not to buy one, especially when they're only $125 off Massdrop, or you can find them used even cheaper around the $100 or $90 or $100 mark if you don't mind some use in it. It's been a better workhorse than I really gave credit for at first. There's so many things which it's just very good at. Like I said, it's a very great all-around EDC profile blade. And there are a few things which I'm not enamored about. One of them is the lock bar tension. There's a lot of lock bar tension on this guy. So much so that it does not really drop shut. I mean, if you shake it, you can get it to drop shut. But this is one of those things where maybe just a little bit more protrusion on the detent ball and a little bit less lock bar pressure would have put this thing solidly in $600 knife territory for this action. But as it sits, you know, it's maybe $200 knife territory. But for $125, that's really saying something. Other than that, you know, I just expect things which I find on this knife on much more expensive knives that I've handled. And it's one of those things which I keep coming back to. There's so much that makes this knife great, which are things that the Chris and Elliot Williamson didn't do. So in other words, right, There's only one sort of groove up here. They resisted the urge to finger groove this or do anything else really with it. And this is one of the reasons I went for the plain version, is because I'm not, I mean, yeah, machining is nice and everything like that, but, it's just not necessary for me. I like the feel of metal in hand. And this stuff, this titanium, this finish on this titanium really is terrific. You gotta feel it. And, this thing fits a wide variety of hands. I mean, if I do my traditional thing where I sort of pinch grip the pivot and I curl my 3 fingers under here because I have huge hands, I can get most knives to work with this type of grip. I'm never going to be able to put a finger up here. Take a look at how close I'm going to slice my finger open if I try to use this finger choil. But, it's not really made for me. It's made for somebody with much smaller hands. That's fine with me. So, it weighs in, like I said, between 4.5 and 5 ounces, depending on how you have it outfitted. And for a 3.5-inch blade, that's where the bank vault solid lockup feel comes to. It's just the solidity in these scales is just terrific. All right. The closest competition comes from a handful of WE Knives models, none of which have this clean Ferrum Forge design. And the closest production knives, which I think in action, which I would compare this thing to, would maybe be the Spider Close Sleesh Buoy, right? Or possibly the Benchmade North Fork. There are a handful of others I can think of, but those two are really closer to it than anything else, given the blade profile, size, intended use, and so on and so forth. Both those knives are considerably more expensive than this thing. The North Fork is around $150 and does not have the action, or is likely to have the centering that this thing has. If you can see, this is really nicely centered. And the Spider Coast Sleesh Buoy was a $275, $280 knife when it was brand new, and now they're going for just crazy, stupid money online. And then the final thing, which I'd like to point out, is this lanyard loop. Right? It's integral into the backspacer, which is really nice. And that backspacer is not jimped or serrated or machined in any way. And I really, really like that. I got to hand it to Chris and Elliot Williamson for just resisting the urge to do extra little things on this knife where it really isn't necessary. Minimalism, I think, is one of those things that gets a bad rap because there aren't a lot of features on things that are minimalist. But when they're done well, it's very, very hard to justify all those extra things. And that's certainly the case here. The other thing I've noticed about this is the WE Knives heat treat. I'm not really sure what their HRC is running, but my guess, just based on sharpening this thing a couple of times, would be between 57 and 59 HRC. Now, that sounds pretty normal, and I think it probably is pretty normal, but it's certainly not a Chris Reeve heat treat, which is, sometimes can clock in at 59 or 60. And, that's, par for the course. Nobody really heat treats S35VN the way Chris Reeve does. But it's not bad. So, my dispatch on this guy is that the Ferrum Forge Massdrop WE Knives Crux is $125, incredibly well spent. For the money, there's really nothing else on the market which has this bank vault solid field, and it seems like all of the budget went into materials and craftsmanship, right where it should be. It's got a very few minor annoyances which can be easily overlooked at $125. Well, everybody, that's it. Thank you for watching this Knife 911. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, share. If you did not enjoy this video, well, let me know what I can do better. Thanks. Bye.